Today, my daughter came to see me, but it wasn't a good visit for either of us, and I don't think she left feeling joyful. She was nice and warm, but too much time has passed, and the pain is too deep for me to just return her kindness without thinking it through. So if she's such a great person, why haven't I talked to her in 5 years until now? It all began with something her mother did. I vividly remember the last words I said to Sarah 5 years ago at her mother's funeral. After one of the most emotional days of my life, I approached Sarah at the gravesite, and with all the bitterness I could muster, I told her she was as non-existent to me as the woman we had just buried. Then I turned to my son Michael and said the same thing to him, wagging my finger in his face as I glanced at the shocked onlookers. I made it clear that my words applied to them too. The stunned reactions of my family and friends, with their wide-eyed expressions, will haunt me for the rest of my days. It was the pain of that moment that will stay with me forever. The pain of our shattered family, the passing of their mother, and losing their father. That day, I walked away from everything, leaving with my youngest daughter, Emily. Our 25th wedding anniversary with my wife, Linda, felt like a distant dream. It was a gorgeous sunny day in June, and all our family and friends gathered to join us. My father, in his wheelchair, sat at the head table with Linda's parents and our 3 children. Everyone, from friends to neighbors, congratulated us and gave us more gifts than we could imagine. Even the town mayor stopped by with a special gift from him and the town council, a plaque declaring June 14th as Linda and Mark Parker Day. Under a large circus tent, over 200 people laughed, ate, and danced late into the night. When it came time to renew our vows, there wasn't a dry eye, especially Linda's and mine. Though I didn't notice tears in anyone else's eyes, I didn't see our children beside us at the altar, our families holding hands in the front row, or even our golden retriever Max lying quietly by the preacher's feet. All I saw was Linda, the woman who completes me, whom I've loved and will continue to love, and whom I intend to spend the rest of my life cherishing. Our oldest daughter, Sarah, had just returned from her honeymoon a week earlier after getting married a month before our celebration. Michael had finished his sophomore year at university, and our youngest, Emily, had completed her freshman year. It was wonderful to have everyone back at home. I wouldn't admit it aloud, but I missed the noise and the chaos of having the kids around. I think Linda felt the same way. For a little while, we were a complete family again. A few days after our anniversary party, I was returning all the chairs, tables, and other party gear to the rental place when I accidentally bumped my truck into a nice new Lexus in the parking lot. I took the corner too sharply and messed up the headlight of the Lexus. The police officer who handled the accident report happened to be Greg, one of the kids who grew up with Michael and played on many of his sports teams. Greg had grown taller than me now, and his uniform gave him an air of authority that added to his stature. I had watched him grow up and felt as proud of him as I did of my own children. After sorting out the paperwork, we ended up just hanging around and chatting about random things. At the end of our conversation, something he said sparked an idea in my mind. "Well, Mr. Parker," Greg said, reaching out to shake my hand, "I gotta head back to the station. It was great to see you again, and I'm sorry I missed your anniversary party. My folks said it was a blast." I shook hands with the guy I remembered trying to steal second base in Little League. He always got thrown out back then, but now he was a man I was proud to call a friend. "Oh, and tell Mrs. Parker to watch those stop signs from now on," he added with a sly smile. "I might not be so lenient next time." I must have looked confused because Greg suddenly seemed embarrassed. "Oops, I didn't mean to say that." I could tell he felt awkward, so I tried to ease the tension and figure out what he meant. "No worries, Greg. Linda doesn't always tell me when she gets a ticket. She thinks I'll get mad and revoke her driving privileges. I won't, but I let her think that to keep the upper hand at dinner tonight. What exactly did you ticket her for? I might want to tease her a bit about it." "I'm sorry, I shouldn't have brought it up. It wasn't a big deal." I smiled wider and reassured him. "No one's in trouble. Just a bit of friendly teasing. Tell me what happened." "Well, it was a couple of weeks ago on Saturday the 31st, I believe. Your wife pulled out of the Holiday Inn parking lot onto Route 40 without stopping at the stop sign. She didn't hit anyone or disrupt traffic, but she drove off so quickly I had to pull her over and remind her to slow down. Technically, I should have given her a ticket for not stopping, but since no harm was done, I let her off with a warning. It wasn't a big deal. Yeah, Greg, you did the right thing. I'll talk to her about being more careful and maybe tease her a bit about it. Thanks for letting me know. Good to see you again. After unloading the chairs and tables, I sat in my truck, reflecting on my chat with Greg. 2 weeks ago on the 31st, I was at my dad's place for the weekend, helping with chores he couldn't manage alone anymore. It was also 2 weeks after Sarah's wedding. That Saturday, I spent the day with Dad, taking him to check out an adult living facility to see if he'd consider downsizing. He wasn't keen on the idea, and I knew he wouldn't be, but I had to try. I was with him all day Saturday and got home around 9 on Sunday evening. I didn't notice anything unusual, and Linda didn't mention anything about a ticket from Greg. She said she had a quiet day at home catching up on reading. I figured Greg must have remembered things wrong because Linda wouldn't lie to me, so I chalked it up to something odd and unexplained in my mind. About a month after the big anniversary party, my sister called to say she found Dad on his kitchen floor during her bi-weekly visit. He had fallen that morning and couldn't get back into his wheelchair by himself. She said he wasn't hurt, just embarrassed. I immediately made plans to stay with him on Saturday and try to convince him to move somewhere smaller where he could have more help. Maybe he'd be scared enough this time to listen, but he's stubborn. Since Michael and Emily were home for the summer, I asked, or rather coerced them into coming with me. I played the guilt card. You guys haven't seen Grandpa in a long time and he won't be around forever. They agreed. Linda said she'd enjoy a quiet day and looked forward to finishing her book. During the hour-long drive, Michael told me about a girl he liked in his Philosophy 101 class, and Emily said she wanted to focus on college without the hassle of a boyfriend. Plenty of time for that after school, she said. We had a pleasant discussion about their perspectives, which naturally led to me recounting, probably for the 100th time, how their mother and I met and fell in love. Dad was more animated than I'd seen him in a while when the kids hugged him and sat down to hear his old, oft-repeated stories. We had brunch, talked, and enjoyed the morning. Around noon, he nodded off in his chair, and we all dispersed to let him rest. Hey, you guys stay here and watch Grandpa. I'll be back soon. I want to go get something to take down that old dead tree in the backyard before it falls on the house. Michael and Emily hung out in the living room watching TV while keeping an eye on Grandpa. Meanwhile, I planned to drive home to get my chainsaw, ropes, and everything else needed to take down a tree. I'm not sure why, but I took the interstate exit onto Route 40. At the bottom of the hill, I saw the entrance to the Holiday Inn across the road, and without thinking, I turned into the motel parking lot. As I stopped and looked around, I noticed the stop sign at the bottom of the hill that Linda missed. It was easy to see how anyone could miss it, including myself. I was about to leave the parking lot when something caught my eye. A car that shouldn't have been there. Linda's car. I stopped and double-checked to make sure I wasn't mistaken. There are plenty of silver Toyota Camrys, but only one with her unique license plate, Ellen Parker. I got out and looked inside. Everything seemed normal, and the doors were locked. I couldn't think of any valid reason why she'd be at the Holiday Inn since she said she wanted to relax with a book. I thought I should check if she knew where her car was. I called home and got the answering machine, but when I called her cell phone, she picked up. Hi, honey. What's up? She sounded cheerful. I don't know why, but I lied, something I've never done before. Oh, nothing. I was out picking up some things at the grocery store for Dad and thought I'd give you a call. I tried home, and since you didn't answer, I tried your cell. Where are you? I'm at the mall. I finished my book and thought I'd do a little shopping. You don't mind, do you? Wow, she just lied to me, or at least I think she did. No, just don't spend the kids' college money. What time will you be home? Probably around 6. Do you want me to make dinner? She asked. No, I'm not feeling too good. I might stay at Dad's tonight and send the kids home. I'll let you know, I replied. Okay, just call me when you decide, she said sadly. Oh, did you drive to the mall alone? I asked, hoping for the truth. Yeah, I drove myself. Just got here a few minutes ago. Why? Just wondering. Well, I've got to go. Have a good time and watch out for Greg when you leave the Holiday Inn, I said before hanging up. I waited, unsure of what to expect. Then I heard a muffled scream from the direction of the hotel. Scanning the area, I saw nothing unusual, especially no source for the scream. I sat on the hood of Linda's Camry, keeping watch. Moments later, a police car pulled up, and Greg stepped out. Hi, Mr. Parker. Did you call 911? He asked. No, Greg, I didn't. Well, someone called about a car break-in. I better check with the manager inside, Greg said. Greg, can you do me a favor? Sure, anything. When you go inside, can you see if Mrs. Parker is there and who she's with? I'll wait here. Okay, wait. Oh, no. I'm sorry, Mr. Parker. I'll be back soon. I'll find out what's happening and come talk to you. Really sorry, Greg said, visibly flustered. He returned to his cruiser and drove toward the entrance. I waited anxiously, but nothing happened for what felt like ages. Finally, in the distance, I heard the wail of a siren. It grew louder as it approached and ceased when it reached the motel entrance. Paramedics emerged, and soon after loaded someone into the ambulance. Greg drove over to me with a solemn look on his face. I'm sorry, Mr. Parker. There was an incident inside. Your wife was taken to county hospital by ambulance. She tried to run through a sliding glass door. Fortunately, it didn't break, but she's badly bruised with a cut over her eye, and she's quite upset. The man who was with her left when the ambulance arrived. I have his information and his statement. I can't share it now, but you can come to the station tomorrow and file a Freedom of Information Act request to get it. Again, I'm truly sorry about this. You and Mrs. Parker are like family to me. He offered his hand to shake mine, but I couldn't respond, tears welling up. Only after he drove away did I somehow manage to drive back to Dad's house. I stood in Dad's driveway, still in a daze, staring at the ground. Emily sensed something was wrong and rushed out, asking, Dad, what's the matter? I was too overwhelmed to speak. She grew increasingly worried until I finally broke down in tears in front of her. I had never cried in front of my children before. Seeing their father in such anguish, Emily started crying too. When Michael joined us through sobs, I told them their mother was in the hospital and they needed to go to her aid. I didn't elaborate or explain what had just happened, but within moments they were in the car and ready to leave. I handed the keys to Michael and said I wouldn't be joining them. I'll stay here tonight, I said quietly. They looked at me with concern, but drove off anyway. I made sure Dad was okay before collapsing on the couch, my heart racing. I stared at the floor and wept uncontrollably. Dad wheeled over and sat next to me. What's on your mind, Mark? What's bothering you? I've never been able to discuss personal matters with my father. He's old-fashioned and always kept his feelings hidden and under control, and I suppose I took after him in that regard. Whenever I faced challenges growing up, he would simply say, "Act like a man and things will work out." I half expected to hear the same advice this time, so I stayed quiet, but he surprised me. Let me share a story with you about your mother and me, something I've never told you, your sister, or anyone else. Just after you were born, I got into trouble at work. Your mother wanted this expensive red dress, and I didn't have the money to buy it for her, so I stole a tool and sold it. I got caught. Eventually, I paid back what I took, but they still fired me and turned me over to the police. I ended up on probation for a year. That was the easy part. Your mother was more furious with me than she had ever been in her life. She was probably more disappointed in me than ever before. It hurt our marriage deeply. She was distant and cold toward me for a long time. Then one day she came home and mentioned she might have found me a job nearby where she worked. She suggested I go there the next morning for an interview. Then she hugged me, looked me in the eye, and said she forgave me. Son, she forgave me for nearly destroying our marriage. She put aside her pride and welcomed me back into her heart. From that day until the day she passed away, I never did anything that didn't make her proud. Her love made me a better man. Yes, she was hurt for a while, but she was a better person than I was, and we moved past it. Mark, I'm not sure what happened, but it sounds like you're going through something similar to what I went through. Maybe you need forgiveness, or maybe you need to forgive someone like your mom did. But maybe whatever happened can't be forgiven. Whatever it is, I believe deep down that you'll make the right and smart choices. I just pray everything works out okay for you. I might not say it often, but I'm very proud of the man you've become, and I love you very much. His words were both a comfort and a challenge. Could I forgive Linda? Did I want to? The phone rang during the night, but I didn't answer it. The same thing happened with my cell phone. I heard them both because I couldn't sleep. I spent the weekend with Dad and spoke to Sarah and Michael on the phone. I didn't talk to Linda when they asked. I wasn't ready for her to see me or hear me in the state I was in. Monday morning, I called work and explained I had a family issue and needed a few days off. I didn't know all the details of what she did. I think my children knew more than I did, but one thing was clear. I couldn't handle knowing anymore. "Hi, Mark." Her familiar voice broke my train of thought and stirred up a whirlwind of emotions again. Without turning, I muttered, "Hi, Linda." I remained still, watching as she pulled a chair up in front of me. "I'm sorry, Mark," she said, looking down at her hands. They had always been beautiful and strong, like the rest of her, but now one was bruised, and the other had a large bandage across it. When I looked up at her face for the first time, I saw the bandages crisscrossing her nose, holding the broken bones together. A big gauze patch covered one eye, hiding the stitches underneath. The other eye was surrounded by a dark bruise that looked black and orange. She looked like a train wreck, as Emily would say. She used to be so beautiful, and now she was so damaged. I couldn't tell if my opinion of her appearance was clouded by my broken heart or if she truly looked that way. "Mark, I came here to apologize. I know 'I'm sorry' isn't enough to fix things, but it's all I have. Sarah drove me here because I'm still too upset to drive. I needed to see you, talk to you, and make you understand what I did. What I did to you, to us, Mark. I messed up. It's my fault, not yours. You didn't do anything wrong. You didn't deserve any of this. As much as I hurt you, I feel the same pain, maybe even more because I caused it. The pain I'm feeling is self-inflicted, and it may have destroyed something that means more to me than life itself. Mark, I want to explain what happened and maybe— No, I don't want to hear anything from you. Knowing what I know now is tearing me apart inside. If I hear any more, it might destroy me. Please, just don't say anything." "But Mark, if you understand what happened, maybe there's a chance you could forgive me. I don't want to lose you. I love you, and you need to understand why I was weak and did what I did." "It all started—" "No, damn it! I told you I don't want to hear it." "But Mark, you have to hear me out. It's the only way we can move past this, the only way we can heal and be a family again. Please, Mark, just listen." "I said no!" I stood up and walked away, leaving her crying into her bruised hands. "Dad, please listen to her," Sarah pleaded as she followed me toward the kitchen. "She needs you to hear her out and forgive her. She wants to explain what happened and apologize so we can move forward." I turned and glared at my eldest daughter, letting out the words that set me on a path that would ultimately lead to my own downfall. "Sarah, if you think listening to her story will fix things between us, you're even more naive than she is. If she needs to clear her conscience, she can write it in a letter and send it to me. I can't sit here and listen to her excuses about why she threw away our 25-year marriage and shattered me in the process. I can't be around her right now. I don't have it in me to forgive her." I got into my car and drove off without knowing where I was headed or if I'd return. I didn't cry much during the drive. Most of my tears were shed on Dad's patio. Right now, I just needed to escape and clear my head. When I returned to Dad's the next day, Emily welcomed me at the door with a smile and a hug. That smile meant the world to me at that moment. It reminded me that happiness could still exist amidst all the misery. It gave me hope that maybe someday I could find happiness again. What it didn't clarify was whether my decision would bring smiles to others. Dad was also glad to see me. During dinner, I laid out my plans to Dad and Emily. "Dad, I've decided to move in here with you for a while. I need some distance from everything, and you could use the help with cooking and cleaning. And honestly, Dad, I've had enough of your cooking to know you could use someone who can cook more than just bacon and eggs. Emily, could you help me gather some things from home? I can't go back while Mom's there, and I need some items for work and here. You can let everyone know that I'll be staying here until I figure out a more permanent solution. Just say Mom and I have separated for now. Keep it brief, no details. Sure, Dad. I'll go back tonight and get what you need. Just give me a list. Should I say anything to Mom? Just let her know I'll be living here and not to call me. When I'm ready, I'll reach out to her. I handed her the list and spent the evening discussing new living arrangements with Dad. From the look on his face, he was glad to have me back, but troubled by the circumstances. He didn't bring up Linda or the recent events. We even did something we hadn't done in years. We played checkers. He won, of course. When Emily returned with our belongings, I was surprised to see her car packed so full. I brought my stuff too, she said firmly. I'll take the guest bedroom and stay here until school starts again. She had a determined look as she helped unload our things. Later that night, I asked her what had happened. Dad, can you believe what Sarah said? She actually thinks you're acting childish and that you should come home and make up with Mom. And Michael was just as bad. He basically said that everyone cheats on their loved ones at some point in life. It's not a big deal. He even suggested you forgive Mom and find yourself a girlfriend on the side. Can you believe those two jerks now, Dad? Emily, I'm not in the mood to hear it. You didn't do anything wrong, yet everyone thinks you're the villain sitting here at Grandpa's house. Mom's the one who messed up. She doesn't deserve forgiveness. That's why I'm here. Those three think you're wrong for not crawling back and apologizing. I couldn't stand that, so I packed my stuff in the car when I got yours. Emily was furious. I knew when she made up her mind like this, there was no changing it, so I sat quietly and let her anger run its course. Over the next few days, the news of Linda's infidelity spread through our small town like wildfire. Every glance from a neighbor, every whispered conversation at the grocery store felt like a dagger to my heart. I quickly became the subject of pity and gossip. I decided to take a leave of absence from work to avoid the looks of sympathy and curiosity from my colleagues. One evening, I went out to retrieve the mail and saw my neighbor Jim standing by his fence. Jim and I had known each other for years. We used to share beers on our porches and talk about the latest football games. Now he looked at me with a mix of pity and discomfort. Hey, Mark, Jim said hesitantly. Hey, Jim, I replied, not really wanting to engage. I heard about what happened. I'm really sorry, man. I nodded, forcing a weak smile. Thanks, Jim. If you need anything, don't hesitate to ask. I appreciate it, I said, turning back toward the house, feeling the weight of his gaze on my back. The offers of help were numerous, but I didn't want anyone's pity. I wanted my life back, my family back. But that seemed impossible now. One afternoon, while I was sitting on the porch, sipping on a beer and lost in my thoughts, I heard a familiar voice. Mark, is that you? I looked up to see Ethan, an old friend from high school, walking up the driveway. Ethan and I had drifted apart over the years, but we had been close once. Ethan? What are you doing here? I asked, genuinely surprised. I heard about everything. Figured I'd come by and see how you're holding up. I gestured to the empty chair next to me. Join me? Ethan sat down and took a beer from the cooler. Man, I'm sorry about what you're going through. It's tough. Yeah, I said, taking a swig. Tough doesn't even begin to cover it. We sat in silence for a while, just drinking and looking out at the yard. You know, Ethan said after a while, I went through something similar a few years back. My ex-wife cheated on me. It was the hardest thing I ever had to deal with. I turned to him, surprised. I didn't know that. I'm sorry, Ethan. It's okay. It was a long time ago, but I remember how isolated I felt, like no one understood. So I just wanted to let you know that you're not alone, Mark. If you ever need to talk, I'm here. I nodded, feeling a lump in my throat. Thanks, Ethan. That means a lot. As the days went by, I tried to keep to myself as much as possible, but the world didn't make it easy. One evening, I received a call from Megan. Dad, we need to talk, she said, her voice strained. What is it, Megan? I asked, dreading the conversation. Mom's been really struggling. She's not eating, not sleeping. I'm really worried about her. I sighed heavily. Megan, she brought this on herself. I can't just go back and pretend everything is okay. I know, Dad, but she's still my mom. And I'm scared she might do something drastic. I felt a pang of guilt but tried to stay firm. I need more time, Megan. I can't face her right now. Please, Dad, just think about it, she pleaded. I'll think about it, I said, more to end the conversation than anything else. After I hung up, I sat on the porch, wrestling with my emotions. Could I forgive Linda? Should I? The questions haunted me, and there were no easy answers. One evening, Michael showed up at Dad's house unannounced. He looked agitated, pacing back and forth on the porch. Dad, we need to talk, he said, his tone demanding. What is it, Michael? I asked, feeling weary. You need to come home and fix this. Mom's a wreck. Megan and I can't handle her alone. I'm not the one who needs to fix anything, Michael. Your mother is the one who broke our family, I replied, my voice rising. Everyone makes mistakes, Dad, but we're still a family. We need to stick together, he argued. I shook my head, feeling my anger boil over. You don't understand. It's not that simple. It is that simple, Dad. Forgive her and come home. We need you. I can't just forgive and forget, Michael. It's not that easy, I said, my voice breaking. Then you're just going to let our family fall apart? He shouted. I don't know what else to do, I admitted, my shoulders sagging. Figure it out, Dad, before it's too late, he said, storming off. I watched him go, feeling more lost and alone than ever. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. The words of my father, Ethan, Megan, and Michael echoed in my mind. Maybe I did need to figure it out. Maybe forgiveness wasn't about forgetting, but about finding a way to move forward. I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't keep running from my problems. It was time to face them head on, no matter how painful it might be. Linda sat in the dimly lit hospital room, staring at her reflection in the small, cracked mirror on the wall. Her once vibrant eyes were now dull, clouded with regret and sorrow. She could barely recognize herself, both physically and emotionally. The weight of her actions crushed her spirit daily, and the pain she had caused Mark haunted her every waking moment. Linda's thoughts drifted back to the first time she met Robert, her affair partner. It was an innocent meeting at first, a chance encounter at a business conference in Chicago. He was charming, attentive, and seemed to understand her in a way that Mark hadn't in years. What started as friendly conversations turned into secret meetings and eventually into a full-blown affair. Linda knew it was wrong, but she couldn't stop herself. She craved the excitement and the escape from the mundane routine of her life. Now, sitting alone in the hospital, she realized the true cost of her actions. She had destroyed her family and shattered the trust of the man she loved. Tears welled up in her eyes as she whispered to herself, I'm so sorry, Mark. I never meant to hurt you like this. As days turned into weeks, Linda's physical and emotional health deteriorated rapidly. She struggled with insomnia, barely ate, and spent most of her time isolated in her room. Megan and Michael tried to support her, but they were also dealing with their pain and confusion. Linda felt like a burden to them, adding to her overwhelming guilt. One evening, Megan found her mother sitting on the edge of her bed, staring blankly at a bottle of sleeping pills. Mom, you need to eat something, please, Megan pleaded, her voice tinged with desperation. Linda looked up, her eyes hollow. I'm not hungry, sweetheart. I can't do this anymore. Megan's heart ached for her mother. She sat down beside her and took the bottle of pills from Linda's hand. Mom, we're going to get through this, but you need to take care of yourself. We need you. Linda managed a weak smile and nodded, but deep down, she felt hopeless. She had pushed away the one person who could truly help her heal, and now she felt trapped in her own guilt and despair. The night of Linda's death, the house was eerily quiet. Megan and Michael were out, trying to find some semblance of normalcy in their lives. Emily was staying with Mark, giving Linda space to recover. Linda sat alone in the bathroom, the bottle of sleeping pills once again in her hand. Her mind raced with thoughts of regret and sorrow. She couldn't see a way out of the darkness that enveloped her. With trembling hands, she opened the bottle and poured the pills into her palm. Tears streamed down her face as she whispered, "I'm sorry, Mark. I love you." She swallowed the pills, feeling a numbness spread through her body. As her vision blurred, she felt a strange sense of peace, believing this was the only way to atone for her sins. Megan returned home later that night, calling out for her mother as she walked through the door. She found Linda in the bathroom, unresponsive, the empty pill bottle lying on the floor. Panic surged through her as she called 911, but deep down, she knew it was too late. Mark was at his father's house when he received the call from Megan. Her voice was barely recognizable through her sobs. "Dad, Mom, she's gone. She took all her sleeping pills. I found her." Mark felt his world collapse around him. The pain of Linda's betrayal was now compounded by the grief of her death. He drove to the hospital in a daze, his mind a whirlwind of emotions. When he arrived, he found Megan and Michael huddled together, their faces pale and tear-streaked. "What happened?" Mark asked, his voice barely a whisper. Megan looked up at him, her eyes filled with anguish. "She couldn't handle it, Dad. She couldn't handle the guilt, the pain." Mark's heart broke as he looked at his children. He had failed to protect them from this nightmare. He pulled them into a hug, feeling their tears soak into his shirt. "I'm so sorry," he whispered, though he wasn't sure if he was apologizing to them, to Linda, or to himself. The days leading up to Linda's funeral were a blur of sorrow and confusion. Mark struggled to process his emotions, feeling a mix of anger, guilt, and profound sadness. He blamed himself for not being able to forgive Linda, for not being there when she needed him the most. At the funeral, the air was thick with tension. Friends and family gathered, but the atmosphere was far from the supportive environment Mark had hoped for. He could feel the judgmental stares and hear the whispered conversations, all speculating on the reasons behind Linda's death. As Mark approached the casket to say his final goodbye, he felt a hand on his shoulder. It was Sarah, her eyes red from crying. "Dad, none of this would have happened if you had just come home and forgiven her," she said, her voice cracking with emotion. Mark turned to her, his own eyes filled with tears. "I know, Sarah, I know." But deep down, he also knew that forgiveness might not have been enough to save Linda from her own demons. After the funeral, the family gathered at the house. Mark found himself in the middle of a heated argument with Michael. "Dad, you should have been there for her. She needed you," Michael accused, his face flushed with anger. "And what about me, Michael? I was hurting too. I needed time," Mark retorted, his voice rising. "She's dead because you couldn't forgive her," Michael shouted. Mark's heart pounded in his chest. "That's not fair, Michael. She made her choices. We all did." Emily, who had been quiet throughout the argument, finally spoke up. "Stop it! This isn't helping. We need to stick together, not tear each other apart." Her words seemed to break the tension, and the room fell silent. Mark looked at his children, seeing the pain and confusion in their eyes. They were all struggling to cope with Linda's death in their own way. The days leading up to Linda's funeral were a whirlwind of preparations and emotions. I found myself overwhelmed with the details of planning the service. Megan and Michael were a great help, coordinating with the funeral home and making arrangements for the reception. Emily and I stayed at Dad's house, trying to maintain a sense of normalcy amidst the chaos. The night before the funeral, Emily sat beside me in the living room, her presence a comforting anchor in the storm. "Dad, are you going to be okay tomorrow?" she asked softly. I nodded, though I wasn't sure. "I'll be fine, Emily. We need to be strong for each other." She took my hand, giving it a reassuring squeeze. "We'll get through this together." The morning of the funeral was overcast, the sky mirroring our collective grief. We arrived at the funeral home early, greeted by friends and family who had come to pay their respects. As we walked in, I could feel the weight of their stares, the whispers that followed us. I took a deep breath and walked up to the casket, my heart heavy with sorrow. Linda looked peaceful, her face free of the pain that had haunted her in her final days. I whispered a silent goodbye, hoping she had found the peace she couldn't find in life. Megan and Michael stood by my side, their faces pale and drawn. Emily clung to my arm, her eyes red from crying. As the service began, we listened to the eulogies, the hymns, and the comforting words of the pastor. But I couldn't shake the feeling of guilt that gnawed at my heart. When it was my turn to speak, I stood before the gathered crowd, my hands trembling. "Linda was a loving wife and mother," I began, my voice thick with emotion. "We shared many wonderful years together, and she will be deeply missed." I paused, struggling to find the right words. Linda's death has left a void in our lives, one that will never be filled. But I believe that in her own way, she is watching over us, hoping that we find the strength to carry on. As I spoke, I could see the tears in the eyes of our friends and family, but I also saw the looks of judgment and blame. It was clear that many held me responsible for Linda's death, believing that my inability to forgive had driven her to despair. After the service, we returned to the house for the reception. The atmosphere was tense, the air thick with unspoken accusations. I tried to avoid the whispers and sidelong glances, focusing instead on being there for my children. As the evening wore on, the tension reached a boiling point. Megan pulled me aside, her eyes flashing with anger. "Dad, we need to talk," she said, her voice low and urgent. "What is it, Megan?" I asked, bracing myself for another confrontation. "Why didn't you forgive her?" she demanded, her voice breaking. "Why couldn't you just come home and make things right?" I felt a surge of anger and guilt. "It's not that simple, Megan. Your mother's actions hurt me deeply. I needed time to heal." "She's dead because you couldn't forgive her," Megan shouted, drawing the attention of the room. "That's not fair, Megan," I replied, my voice rising. "Your mother made her choices. She's not the only one who was hurting." Michael joined the argument, his face contorted with rage. "Dad, you should have been there for her. We all needed you." "I was trying to protect myself," I said, my voice shaking. "I was in pain, too." Emily stepped between us, her eyes filled with tears. "Stop it! This isn't helping. We need to stick together, not tear each other apart." Her words broke through the tension and the room fell silent. I looked at my children, seeing the pain and confusion in their eyes. We were all struggling to cope with Linda's death in our own way, and the blame and anger were tearing us apart. In the days following the funeral, the community's reaction became more pronounced. Some friends and neighbors offered their condolences, while others avoided me, their judgment evident in their cold stares. It was clear that the story of Linda's affair and my refusal to forgive had spread, and many blamed me for her tragic end. One afternoon, I went to the local grocery store hoping to pick up a few essentials. As I walked down the aisles, I could feel the eyes of the other shoppers on me. Whispers followed me, and I caught snippets of conversations. "Isn't that Mark Parker? The one whose wife? Yeah, I heard he couldn't forgive her. Drove her to it, they say." I tried to ignore the whispers, focusing on my task, but the weight of their judgment was suffocating. I quickly paid for my groceries and left, feeling more isolated than ever. Back at Dad's house, I sat on the porch, lost in thought. The community's reaction, my children's anger, and my own guilt weighed heavily on my mind. I needed to find a way to move forward, to heal the wounds that Linda's death had left behind. That evening, I called a family meeting. Megan, Michael, and Emily gathered in the living room, their faces tense with anticipation. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," I began, my voice steady. "I know we're all hurting, and we've been blaming each other for what happened to your mother. But we can't keep tearing each other apart. We need to find a way to heal, to move forward." Megan looked at me, her eyes filled with tears. "How do we do that, Dad?" "We start by talking to each other, by listening and understanding," I replied. "I'm willing to hear what you all have to say, and I hope you'll do the same for me." Michael nodded, his expression softening. "Okay, Dad, we can try." Emily reached out and took my hand, her grip firm and reassuring. "We'll get through this together, Dad." As we sat together, sharing our feelings and memories, I felt a glimmer of hope. It wouldn't be easy, but I knew that if we faced our pain together, we could find a way to heal. The weeks following Linda's funeral were a blur of emotions. The house felt emptier than ever, and the silence was deafening. I tried to keep busy, focusing on work and helping Dad around the house. Emily stayed with us, her presence a comforting reminder that not all was lost. One morning, as I was making coffee, Emily joined me in the kitchen. "Dad, I've been thinking, maybe we should do something to honor Mom's memory," she suggested. I looked at her, curious. "What do you have in mind?" She smiled softly. "Mom loved gardening. How about we create a memorial garden in the backyard? It could be a place where we can remember her and find some peace." The idea warmed my heart. "I think that's a wonderful idea, Emily. Let's do it." Over the next few weekends, Emily and I worked tirelessly on the garden. We planted flowers that Linda loved, roses, lilies, and daisies. We added a small bench and a stone pathway, creating a serene space where we could sit and reflect. As we worked, Emily and I talked about everything: Linda, the past, and our hopes for the future. These conversations were therapeutic, helping us both to heal. Emily's strength and resilience amazed me, and her unwavering support made the process a little less painful. One afternoon, as we planted the last of the roses, Emily looked at me with a determined expression. "Dad, have you thought about talking to someone? A therapist, maybe?" I sighed, wiping the sweat from my forehead. "I don't know, Emily. I've never been one for therapy." She placed a hand on my arm, her gaze steady. "It might help. You don't have to go through this alone." Her words stayed with me, and later that evening I decided to take her advice. I reached out to a therapist, setting up my first appointment for the following week. In therapy, I began to unpack the layers of pain and guilt that had been weighing me down. My therapist, Dr. Collins, was patient and understanding, guiding me through the process of confronting my emotions. During one session, she asked me to reflect on my relationship with Linda, both the good times and the bad. As I spoke about our early years together, I felt a mix of nostalgia and sadness. We had shared so many wonderful moments, but the betrayal had overshadowed them all. "Mark, it's important to acknowledge both the positive and negative aspects of your relationship," Dr. Collins said gently. "You need to find a way to integrate these memories and understand that they are all part of your story." Her words resonated with me, and I realized that to heal, I needed to embrace the entirety of our past, not just the pain. As I continued therapy, I also made an effort to reconnect with old friends. Ethan, who had been a supportive presence since Linda's affair came to light, suggested we start meeting regularly for coffee. One Saturday morning, we sat at our favorite cafe, sipping on lattes and catching up. "You know, Mark," Ethan said, "it's good to see you getting out more. Isolation only makes things worse." I nodded, appreciating his concern. "You're right, Ethan. I've been so focused on my own pain that I forgot how important it is to stay connected." He smiled, clapping me on the shoulder. "We're here for you, man. Don't forget that." Returning to work was another step toward normalcy. My colleagues welcomed me back with open arms, and I threw myself into my projects, finding solace in the familiar routine. My boss, Mr. Thompson, called me into his office one afternoon. "Mark, I know you've been through a lot, and I want you to know that we're here to support you. If you ever need time off or someone to talk to, don't hesitate to ask." I thanked him, grateful for the understanding. "I appreciate that, Mr. Thompson. Work has been a good distraction, but I'm also trying to face my emotions head on." He nodded approvingly. "That's the right approach. And Mark, there's a new project coming up that I think you'd be perfect for. It's a bit of a challenge, but I believe you're ready." The opportunity excited me, and I agreed to take it on. The project provided a new sense of purpose, and I found myself looking forward to the challenges ahead. In an effort to fill the void left by Linda's absence, I also explored new interests and hobbies. I joined a local book club, something I had always wanted to do but never found the time for. The group welcomed me warmly, and our discussions about literature provided a much-needed escape. One evening, during a meeting at the library, I met a woman named Laura. She was a fellow book lover, and we quickly struck up a conversation about our favorite novels. As the weeks went by, we became friends, often meeting for coffee or a walk in the park. Laura's friendship was a breath of fresh air. She was kind, understanding, and had a calming presence that made me feel at ease. We talked about everything, from books to life's challenges, and she became a valuable part of my support system. As the months passed, I began to feel a sense of renewed hope. The pain of Linda's betrayal and death was still there, but it no longer consumed me. I had found ways to cope, to heal, and to look forward to the future. One evening, Emily and I sat in the memorial garden watching the sunset. She turned to me, her eyes reflecting the fading light. "Dad, I'm proud of you. You've come a long way." I smiled, feeling a warmth spread through my chest. "I couldn't have done it without you, Emily. Thank you for being my rock." She leaned her head on my shoulder, and we sat in comfortable silence, the garden a symbol of our journey toward healing. As I continued my journey of healing, I decided to take up a new hobby, writing. I had always enjoyed storytelling, and it seemed like the perfect way to channel my emotions. I enrolled in a creative writing class at the local community college, eager to hone my skills and meet new people. On the first day of class, I was pleasantly surprised by the diversity of the group. People from all walks of life had gathered, each with their own stories to tell. Our instructor, Mrs. Jenkins, encouraged us to share our work and provide constructive feedback to one another. During one session, we were asked to read our latest pieces aloud. A woman named Alicia stood up and began to read her story. Her voice was calm and soothing, and her words painted vivid pictures in my mind. I was captivated by her storytelling ability and found myself drawn to her. After class, I approached Alicia, eager to discuss her work. "Hi, Alicia. I really enjoyed your story. Your writing is incredible." She smiled warmly. "Thank you, Mark. I appreciate that. I enjoyed your piece as well. You have a real talent for capturing emotion." We struck up a conversation, and I quickly realized how much we had in common. Alicia had moved to the area recently, seeking a fresh start after the loss of her husband. Our shared experiences of grief and healing created an instant bond between us. Over the next few weeks, Alicia and I grew closer. We often stayed after class to discuss our writing, sharing ideas and offering feedback. Our friendship deepened, and we began to spend time together outside of class. We went for walks, attended local events, and enjoyed long conversations over coffee. One evening, as we sat on a park bench watching the sunset, Alicia turned to me with a thoughtful expression. "Mark, I've been thinking. We both have experienced so much pain and loss, but we've also found ways to heal. Maybe it's time we allow ourselves to find happiness again." Her words resonated with me, and I felt a spark of hope. "I think you're right, Alicia. We deserve to be happy." Our relationship blossomed from that moment. We supported each other through the highs and lows, sharing our dreams and fears. Alicia's presence brought a sense of joy and stability to my life that I hadn't felt in a long time. Of course, our journey wasn't without its challenges. There were moments when memories of Linda and Alicia's late husband surfaced, bringing with them waves of grief and guilt. But we faced these moments together, supporting each other and acknowledging our pasts while focusing on our future. One day, Alicia suggested we take a trip to the coast, a place she had always wanted to visit. The idea excited me, and we made plans for a weekend getaway. The trip was a turning point for us, filled with laughter, new experiences, and a deepening of our bond. As we walked along the beach, hand in hand, Alicia looked at me with a smile. "Mark, I'm so grateful to have you in my life. You've brought so much happiness and healing to my heart." I squeezed her hand, feeling a rush of emotion. "And you've done the same for me, Alicia. I can't imagine my life without you." Back at home, our relationship continued to flourish. We supported each other's passions, Alicia with her painting and me with my writing. Our home became a sanctuary of creativity and love, filled with the warmth of shared dreams and mutual support. One evening, as we sat in the memorial garden, Alicia turned to me with a thoughtful expression. "Mark, have you ever considered publishing your stories? They're beautiful and could help so many people going through similar experiences." Her suggestion planted a seed in my mind. I began to explore the possibility of publishing my work, excited by the prospect of sharing my journey and perhaps helping others find hope and healing. Alicia and I decided it was time to introduce each other to our families. She had 3 children from her previous marriage, and I was eager to meet them. We planned a dinner at our house, inviting her children and my own. The evening was filled with a mix of excitement and nervousness. As everyone gathered around the table, I could see the curiosity and warmth in Alicia's children's eyes. They welcomed me with open arms, eager to learn more about the man who had brought happiness back into their mother's life. My children, too, were curious about Alicia. Megan, Michael, and Emily asked her questions about her life and her journey, and I could see them beginning to understand the bond we shared. The evening was a success, filled with laughter, stories, and the promise of new beginnings. As the months passed, Alicia and I grew even closer. One evening, while we were enjoying a quiet dinner at home, I decided to take a leap of faith. I had been carrying the ring in my pocket for weeks, waiting for the right moment. "Alicia," I began, my heart pounding, "these past months with you have been the happiest of my life. You've brought so much joy and healing to my heart, and I can't imagine my future without you." Her eyes filled with tears as she realized what was happening. I got down on one knee, holding out the ring. "Will you marry me?" Alicia's smile was radiant as she nodded, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Yes, Mark, I will." We embraced, our hearts filled with joy and hope for the future. The journey that had begun in pain and loss had led us to a place of love and new beginnings. As Alicia and I planned our wedding, I knew I needed to address the unresolved issues with my children. The pain and anger from Linda's death still lingered, creating a rift that needed healing. I reached out to Megan, Michael, and Emily, inviting them over for a family meeting. We gathered in the living room, the atmosphere tense but hopeful. I took a deep breath and began, "I know we've all been through a lot, and there's still a lot of pain, but I want us to move forward, to heal together." Megan looked at me, her eyes filled with a mix of sadness and hope. "Dad, we've all been hurting. We need to talk about Mom, about everything that happened." "I know, Megan," I said gently, "and I'm ready to listen. I want us to understand each other's pain and find a way to support each other." Michael spoke up, his voice soft. "Dad, I blamed you for a long time, but I realize now that we were all struggling. I'm sorry for the things I said." I felt a wave of relief wash over me. "Thank you, Michael. I'm sorry too. We all said things in the heat of the moment that we didn't mean." Emily, who had been quiet, finally spoke. "I miss Mom every day, but I also see how much happier you are now, Dad. Alicia is wonderful, and I want us to be happy as a family again." I smiled, feeling tears well up in my eyes. "Thank you, Emily, and thank you all for being here, for being willing to talk. I love you all so much, and I want us to move forward together." With the support of my family and Alicia, I decided to pursue Alicia's suggestion of publishing my stories. I reached out to a few publishers, and to my surprise, one expressed interest. They loved my work and wanted to publish a collection of my stories. The process was both exciting and daunting. I worked closely with an editor, refining my stories and preparing them for publication. The support from Alicia and my children was invaluable, their encouragement giving me the confidence to share my work with the world. The day my book was released was one of the happiest of my life. We held a small celebration at home, surrounded by friends and family. Alicia beamed with pride, and my children expressed their admiration and support. During the celebration, Megan pulled me aside. "Dad, I'm so proud of you. Mom would be too. You've come a long way." I hugged her tightly, feeling a deep sense of gratitude and love. "Thank you, Megan. It means the world to me to have your support." As the months passed, our family continued to heal and grow closer. Alicia and I focused on planning our wedding, excited for the future we were building together. My children were supportive, helping with the preparations and expressing their joy for our new beginning. One sunny afternoon, we gathered in the memorial garden, the place that had become a symbol of our healing and hope. Alicia and I stood hand in hand, surrounded by our children and close friends, ready to embark on this new chapter of our lives. The ceremony was simple but beautiful, filled with love and joy. As we exchanged vows, I felt a profound sense of peace and happiness. The journey that had begun in pain and loss had led us to this moment of love and renewal. After the ceremony, we celebrated with a reception in the garden. Laughter and music filled the air, and I felt a deep sense of gratitude for the love and support of those around us. That evening, as Alicia and I sat on the porch watching the sunset, I reflected on the journey we had been through. The pain and loss had been overwhelming, but it had also led to growth, healing, and new beginnings. Alicia, I said softly, I never imagined I could find happiness again after everything that happened, but you've brought so much joy and love into my life. She smiled, resting her head on my shoulder. And you've done the same for me, Mark. We've both come a long way, and I'm so grateful for every moment with you. As we sat together, surrounded by the beauty of the garden and the warmth of our love, I felt a deep sense of peace. The journey had been difficult, but it had led us to a place of healing and happiness, and for that, I was profoundly grateful. Life continued to move forward, filled with new challenges and joys. Alicia and I supported each other through every step, our bond growing stronger each day. My children continued to heal, finding their own paths and building their own lives. One evening, Emily called with exciting news. Dad, I've been accepted into a graduate program. I'm moving to New York next month. I felt a surge of pride and happiness. That's amazing, Emily. I'm so proud of you. Thank you, Dad. I couldn't have done it without your support. As we continued to celebrate life's milestones, I realized that the journey of healing and growth never truly ends. It's a continuous process, filled with ups and downs, but also with moments of profound joy and love. And as I looked at the life Alicia and I had built together, surrounded by the love of our family and friends, I knew that despite the pain and loss, we had found a way to move forward, to heal, and to find happiness again.